supports religious revival in the West. Example, young people returning to Christianity, politicians expressing their religious identity. Welcoming the first proposition speaker to begin the debate. Here.
Hi, am I both visible and audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. The greatest crisis facing the modern West right now is not a crisis of wealth. It is a crisis of meaning itself. As people lose faith in institutions and communities and one another, they increasingly struggle to find purpose and belonging. The religious revival in the West, then, that we support helps fill that void. Because when you create community, when you create fulfillment, when you stimulate the very social fabric necessary for change, you enact both better policies and better lives through stronger moral and spiritual connections. Two arguments in my speech. Number one, as to why this rise in religious revival in the West creates better community and lives for people on the ground. Number two, as to why you enhance better policies and better politics. 2 points of framing before that, then. Number one, what does religious revival in the West actually look like, right? We would frame to you that obviously people start believing more in religion and returning back to like religion itself, like religions like Christianity. So this is oftentimes facilitated in three ways. Number one, it is facilitated by media itself, or also your surroundings and your family that just start do already have an origin in that religion in and of itself. But number two, we would say that in the modern day, there's an increase in communication platforms and just efficiency of communication overall, like in social media, for example. So therefore, it is far easier for people to spread their ideas. And since people are very, very influenced by the media and things surrounding them, it is likely that this religious revival is spread through that increase in efficiency of communication. Number three, there's a liberalization of religion that is currently going on. For example, churches are literally endorsing pride right now. They have pride flags hanging on their church walls, like literally in the middle of the sermon. Or for example, like reinterpreting Bible texts of God loves everyone, so we ought not to discriminate against certain groups of people, although traditional dogma says we should, because that means that the religious liberalization means that religion itself is becoming far more accepting of people, regardless of who you are and what you identify as. Also, note the fact that Pope Francis literally out out loud claimed that being gay is not a sin. I think this itself already illustrates to you as to how religion in and of itself is becoming far more progressive. This is important because people who previously did not buy into religion itself did not buy into it because they thought it was too traditional. The barrier of entry to them was too high. However, now you take down that idea of it is too traditional, people are more likely to opt in given that there's a liberalization. Religious revival also looks like things just like more looking at text, discussion of God's words, and application of your faith and belief into your daily life. Number two, then, I'll take you after this. What does absent of religious revival actually look like on their side of the house? There's more individualism and individualistic thinking, right? You identify yourself not based off your like religion, communal identity, rather based off like your race or very separating characteristics like your skin, your gender, political party. The sense of community on their side of the house then is actively decreased given that there's no unifying feature unifying the people on the ground. Before going on to my first argument, I'll take a point.
All you do so far to prove liberalization is to provide some limited examples. The nature of organized religion is that it is largely influenced by authorities who are conservative. What is the main metric against that?
I think that is just not true that religious authorities in and of itself like truly do affect the majority of religion itself, because understand that we're not living in like the 19,000s or 18,000s anymore. There's a mass amount of discussion that is currently going on, right? Like for example, if an authority says something, people do actually discuss whether or not those words are true, given that more activism is happening and more people are speaking up in general within society. But also the fact that those authorities themselves are also becoming far more liberalized. Like we give you an example of like Pope Francis, and also Pope Francis literally started criticizing Trump as well for being too radical and too like not like abiding by God's words, for example. So we would tell you that overall the trend is that religion is becoming more accepting and more liberalized. On to the first argument as to why this religious revival in the West create better community and better support systems for people on the ground. And I want to, number one, frame what religion itself actually argues for and what it actually is, right? Because understand that the context and essence of religion itself is not to actually ostracize minorities or ostracize like other people. It is rather to want to help people because that is what God says. If you actually look into the Bible, for example, that is also what it says. Like, for example, love thy neighbor. So, A, you obviously want to help other people. Like, religion itself wants to help other people, right? This is like churches themselves initiating things like food stamps or having charity, or even like if we take another religion like Zakat in Islam, which is like one of the 5 pillars, which is irregardless, there's active volunteering. Like for example, in Coastal Church in Vancouver, Canada, they have large church food drives to people that are homeless on the streets and actually help them. But B, I think that religion itself creates cohesion and community because of the fact that they accept new people continuously into their churches. They bond and reveal their own secrets, and they're able to get off a lot of the burden they have or a lot of the worries they have from work or just their daily basis and share them with each other because they know it is a safe space and those secrets are going to be kept and people are going to become supportive of each other because of the fact that there's a community that exists there. Number two, then, why is this now religious revival then create a better community given that that is the basis of religion in and of itself? A, we already told you that there's a liberalization of religion happening. And therefore, because there's a liberalization of religion happening, that means more people are likely to buy into religion in and of itself in the first place because the exact reason why people previously didn't buy into it is completely removed now. So therefore you're able to reach more people. That means there's more thorough discussion and like more thoughts are put into those discussions as well because you have more diverse amounts of people with diverse amounts of backgrounds engaging in religion and those religious discussions. For example, the idea of LGBTQ, right? It was extremely opposed against in like previous eras, like 100 years ago. The church could not endorse in such ideas. However, now because there's a widespread, and also that would be further widespread through the support of like religious revival now, that means that you're able to actually facilitate better and more accepting conversations of religion and people are going to buy into this. Also understand the fact that people in general just become far more understanding and compromising because people who are traditionally extremely like believing in traditional dogma and have little interaction with people unlike themselves are likely to change their own perception. Moreover, they are also more likely to become compromising because of capitalism, and religion itself is more likely to be fulfilling within their lives because of capitalism itself. Because everybody is so busy trying to make money, more likely to have more laxer regulations or religious regulations on those people and their lives and better fit within their own personal lives as well. So they feel better and feel more fulfilled because religion itself is also fit in a scope where it's able to benefit you while also not restricting you. Like for example, you don't have to like pray 5 times a day because of the fact that you're working in a very capitalist system. But B, I think that just apart from the opportunity in and of itself and religion, there's also just competition between denominations to try to actually make sure that you get your best fulfillment as well, right? For example, their proselytization is a major goal of religion in and of itself. They want to get people to step into their denomination, so therefore they're more likely to make religion something that better fits their life and makes their life extremely like fulfilling. So then what are the impacts of this, right? I think number one, religion itself creates a lot of spiritual fulfillment in your life because it helps you navigate your life. It gives you a purpose in life. For example, you were laid off from your job. You do not know what to do. At least now you can pray to God and wish that something better can happen. And this provides you a lot of spiritual catharsis. But number two, I think it actually also actively helps the vulnerable, like through things like food stamps, welfare, and the fact that you have an end goal in life that you're trying to reach, I think you're actually able to better society. Number two, then, on as to why we better politics in general, because notice that in society right now, it is very politically polarized. Like LGBTQ rights is a very like immigration, racism, and discrimination. People are unwilling to engage in conversation because there's no binding social fabric that binds them together. Therefore, then on our side of the house, people are more likely to engage in societal discussions and actually change those norms because of the fact that there's a common ground they're able to negotiate things based off of on, and therefore you're able to get better discussion for better policies in the future. For all those reasons, we're very, very proud to propose.
I thank the first proposition speaker for that fine speech. Welcome the leader of opposition for their case.
Sorry, I'm just gonna go get my notes. Okay, POIs verbally, please. Christianity in Europe tells its followers that abortion is a sin and that its followers must not support laws for abortion access. Thousands of people died because of those restrictive laws. Pastors in America tell their followers that Muslims are replacing Christians and that is why immigration must be stopped. Their campaigning directly increased support for ICE that violated the civil liberties of so many vulnerable people. Government can try and throw around a bunch of examples about how liberalization, how religion is liberalizing. We don't think that that's the case. We're the side that uniquely is going to give you proper constructive mechanistic reasons why that is the case. Proud to oppose. There's going to be two things I'm to my speech. Firstly, on framing, then I'll move on to my two main cases. Firstly, on the framing, then, three main things to point out. Firstly, what does the counterfactual on our world look like? What's a world without this religious revival? What we tell you is that on our side, what our side looks like is a world in which secularization continue to happen, where secular institutions like medical institutions, like therapy, likely expanded on our side instead of stuff like churches or mosques. Second piece of framing, then, what we tell you is that religion is just inherently exclusionary. Why is that? There are two main reasons for this. Firstly, it's because religion is created by making an in-group and an out-group. They say that these are the people that are the followers of God and everyone else is going to hell. That is why the people that are following the religion are good people and that is why you should join us. Then inherently speaking, it must create a minority that they must attack. It must create sins. It must create people that should be persecuted and that are terrible people. Then I genuinely think that no matter how much liberalization happens, to some extent, religion will always be exclusionary. But secondly, and more importantly, I think no matter how much religion is going to liberalize in that aspect, I just think that religions can never accept another religion because that is the one big red line you can never cross. As a Christian, if you say, "Oh, I think that being like following Islam is like correct and good," that is at the point in which you're saying that your own faith could be somewhat wrong. That is something that a pastor, that is something that a pope can never agree to, and that is at the point in which exclusion towards other religious groups will always happen. The third piece of framing is more important. That is to say that religious moderation can never happen. This is true for two main reasons. Firstly, it's because the core religious influence that is created by the most devoted people who are often the most conservative. For example, the most vocal people are the people that have been here the longest. That is to say, the Pope has the biggest say in what happens within Christianity. Therefore, if the Pope is conservative, that's at the point in which teachings can never change, even when religious revival happens. But secondly, I think institutions are made to be conservative to begin with. Oftentimes, the Pope, the preachers that have spent a lot of time learning scriptures and hardline beliefs rise through the ranks, and those are the people that control policy. Then I think that it is very much based on scripture. They cannot assert that religion is liberalizing and get away with it. I don't think it is. I think it is still very, very radical. Then let's get into the main case then on how minorities are harmed through exclusionary policies. I'm going to give you two main layers here. Firstly, on why religious revival leads to more extremism of religious people, and secondly, why those harmful narratives are going to spread through society. On the first layer then, on why religious revival leads to even more extremism of religious people. Notice here that I'm giving you a response to government's claim on why religion is progressive. I'm going to flip this and tell you why rather religious revival is going to make it even more conservative. This is true for two main reasons. Firstly, it is because religious leaders react to the narrative and fear that their religion is going to become moderated and liberalized because new younger people join and push back by creating even more extreme religions and by teaching their followers even more extreme religious texts. They go back to their fundamentals and they tell their followers that this is the true and original meaning of Christ. You mustn't be swayed by this new rhetoric. Then no matter how much they're able to prove that new people will be somewhat liberal, then I think that these sorts of fears are going to counteract that sort of new aspect. But second piece of mechanism, I think that new followers are also somewhat lost and actually want more radical religious ideals. That is to say, they likely desire for strict religion because they want a sense of belonging, because they want to feel unique. That is at the point in which they buy into the extreme narratives that are being served up to them by their pastors. Then religions provide super extremist teachings, and new followers are going to buy into those religious teachings. That is why evangelicalism is rising within the US. That there are so many different extremist religions that are rising in the US and within Europe right now. That is the specific reason why. Layer two, then. Why do these harmful narratives and why is that religious expansion going to spread through society? This is true for two main reasons. Firstly, is because political discourse often turns religious when religious revival happens. That is to say, this looks like Trump using politics as a justification for his policy. He says abortion is bad because God said so. Then at that point, then I'd assume that religion is going to impact public policy as a whole. But second reason why harmful narratives spread is because exclusionary policies become normalized. At the point in which you pass one law because of your religion, that is at the point in which you're justified in doing that a million more times. You can start saying, oh, marriage is bad because my book says so. That is at the point in which so many of these exclusionary policies likely become normalized and likely become supported within society. What is our counterfactual? Our counterfactual is three things. Firstly, I think a lot of religious people just don't speak up without religious revival. That is to say, using religion as politics is not normalized in our world, in a secularized world, and therefore people don't speak up. But secondly, I think that just generally speaking, new people don't join into religion, which is good because once you join, religious compromise becomes impossible. Your teaching is the one true teaching. You cannot compromise with anyone anymore. But thirdly, I think there's a radicalization of the most extreme factions that doesn't happen on our side. And I think that is important because the most radical groups do the worst things like hate crimes. That doesn't exist on our side anymore because radicalization doesn't happen to a big extent on our side. What are the impacts then? There are two main impacts. Firstly, and most importantly, I think the most extreme harms don't happen like hate crimes. That is to say, religious revival led to stuff like religiously motivating shootings in the UK, stabbings in the UK. Look at the attempted terror attack that happened at the Era store, which was perpetrated by young Muslim extremists. Generally speaking, all of those hate crimes aren't going to happen on our side. But secondly, and more broadly, I think the normalization of exclusionary policies aren't going to happen on our side. We protect minorities. Now let's get into the second case on how we get better support systems for younger people. This directly clashes with their case, and I'm going to prove to you that the sort of community that their side tries to push just isn't good to begin with. This is true for three main reasons. Firstly, because you generally are more constrained through your teaching, right? Because notice that within a religion, even if you have stuff like even if you're suffering through stuff like AIDS, even if you have religious guilt about being gay, those sorts of things you cannot speak to with your pastor. And then generally speaking, a lot of the struggles that people go through, you simply cannot solve through religious teaching. But secondly, notice how religious people, like pastors are not pros. They are not therapists. I don't think that they can help you in the vast majority of scenarios. And thirdly, just generally speaking, I think a lot of religious teachings are just bad for your mental health. They are exclusionary. They lead to stuff like religious guilt. And I think that that is bad overall. My second speaker is going to explain the counterfactual. So proud.
I thank the leader of opposition for that fine speech. Welcome the Deputy Prime Minister to extend their case.
Cool. Am I visible and audible?
Yes, you are.
Great. Western modernity is exhausted and characterized by loneliness. When young people have millions of others accessible from their phones, yet still eat dinner alone every night, we'd say that something ought to be done. When our very social fabric is torn apart, we need the unifying power of religion, very, very proud to oppose. We don't think ought can claim that all religion is just completely hateful and completely xenophobic when the Bible literally says the foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born, love them as yourself. We think that it is extremely problematic for them just to characterize all religion as hateful. Very proud to oppose. I'm going to do a few things in the speech. First of all, I'm going to address whether religion is liberalizing at all, and I'm going to structurally prove this. Then I'm going to talk about extremism and minorities and prove to you why they actually get worse extremism on their side of the house. Then thirdly, I'm going to address community and also prove to you why they disproportionately harm the lower class in communities. First, on whether liberalization is even occurring at all. Team Japan tells you that religion is not liberalizing because authority figures are still conservative and they push the majority of religion. We break the deadlock on this for a few ways. Number one, not only empirically do we see a trend of liberalization, i.e. the current and previous popes, which, by the way, are the supreme authority of religion if they really want to talk about religion, authority so bad, but also this is structurally true for a few reasons. Number one, right before the religious revival, we saw the least religious time of history in the West. Why was this true? Because there was growing online and general pushback against outdated norms that were believed to be racist, to be discriminatory, to be problematic. This means that religious authorities are thus incentivized to liberalize in order to generate more buy-in. Because absent buy-in, the religion dies insofar as if you do not have more people buying into your religion, you cannot have more effective governance. I'll take you later. But secondly, note an additional mechanism here. Team Japan fundamentally neglects who the target audience of religion is right now. Overwhelmingly, it is young religious people as opposed to old religious people. What is the implication of this? We see that currently the younger generation is a lot more liberalized as a whole, but also that they're a lot more exposed to different types of stimuli. In the past, they were only exposed to one main thing, and that was the one religious concept they were continuously preached to as a child. That's why they internalized it, and that's why they thought of it as their faith and their sole way of determining life. But comparatively, on our side of the house, instead of status quo, on their side as well, we'd say that young people are increasingly exposed to social media, different forms of stimuli, different information. So they're exposed to so many other different viewpoints that is no longer enough for religion just to be like, we're just going to tell you what is right, and you're going to not contest this worldview at all. That's why religion must be progressive and must liberalize in order to face this matching and this changing world. For all those reasons, we'd say that religion is uniquely liberalizing. But before I move on,
you say that people are desperate and this community cannot be swapped with other things. When that's the case, why would they themselves to protest against this religion actively? Because that could mean that you're going to lose that community.
Okay, so I'd say that this is fundamentally a different point than I'm talking about right now, but let's talk about community real quick. I'll address it in third class. We'd say that ultimately, when young people don't protest against community because that is the one main form of self-determination that they can get. We'd say that this is a very good form of self-determination that they're able to undergo. I don't understand the point of your POI here. We'd say that they can have community and also protest against bad forms of community and ultimately get a more inclusive community religiously that's still good for them. Then, with that proven, then I'm going to move on secondly to extremism and minorities. So even if religion isn't necessarily progressive right now and it's not liberalizing hugely, why are they still far worse for extremism? This is for a few reasons. Number one, know what this debate is actually about, and I encourage you to read the actual motion. This debate is about the revival across the West. What this means is that on their side of the house, they still have to defend Trump or the AfD exclusively. Team Japan does a lot of mechanization on how extremism is bad, but conveniently, their only reason for why they solve is because they don't have religious extremism anymore. This is very confusing. We'd say that on their side of the house, they still have to defend religion operating in the fringe because obviously on their side, it's not like a snap of a finger and then religion just disappears, right? There's still obviously going to be huge incentives for exceptionally conservative and also far-right regimes to still use religion as a mobilizing force. We'd say that comparatively, on our side of the house, we're far better because religion is now very difficult to leverage. Why? We'd say that on their side of the house, they only have one option, which is the far right party, and they're the only side that actually says, we're being Christian. Therefore, if you aren't to be a good Christian, you're voting for us. Comparatively, on our side of the house, you now have far more options. What does this look like? This looks like how maybe Democratic politicians are also saying we are Christian, and they're going to outline specific Bible lines that show that they should probably support immigration, that they should probably love thy neighbor, all these things. That means that now you have a choice. It no longer is coercion because now you have two Christian parties. It's not just one that you have to go to, and you don't have that confliction inside of your heart because you think that if by voting for Democrats you're going to go to hell. Because now both sides are saying if you were a Christian, that means that now you don't have that dilemma inside of you, and now you uniquely have more choice on our side of the house to combat extremism. Importantly, note that religion is now difficult to leverage because it's supportive of humankind as a whole. This looks like how Pope Leo is actively calling out Trump for being extremely bigoted, extremely hated. But then, thirdly, even if we concede that somehow on their side, far-right politicians go, yes, I'm suddenly going to abandon all religion because I don't care about religion anymore, we'd still flip their claim on extremism because they're likely to use personal identifying factors or attributes that cannot transcend race, gender, or socioeconomic class. They're still part of secularism. What does this look like? This looks like how you cater to white men rather than Christians as a whole. Now you're not able to find a common identity between races and between sexes, but now you're just going to have to characterize and cater to your very specific group. That means you get more extremism, that means you get more bigotism, and it means you still get hatred of immigrants, but for a different reason, which they do not fix this issue, and in fact, it gets even worse. Then, also note that they have to defend religion as implicit or fringe motivation of the politician, because maybe they don't overtly and explicitly say it out loud, but they still have it as a crucial motivating factor that still drives a huge amount of hate. Then, what did they say on extremism and minorities past this? On their first mechanism, they tell you that new followers want very strict religion, and that's why we have extremism. I think this is quite logically incoherent, right? They fundamentally conflate the type of stringent scripture you want. Because if you go into religion searching for the meaning of life, you don't really want the pastor to tell you, so now because you want the meaning of life, you're going to go commit a hate crime. I think more realistically, it's going to be very stringent rules on how you live your life personally. Maybe that is true, but I think that is fine because it looks like, you need to pray 5 times a day. You need to consistently pray to God. You need to like fast all the time, or you need to have all of these prayers. We'd say that is perfectly fine because those are stringent rules, but they don't require the harming of other people. Then, they also say that they can't compromise on other religions. I think this is untrue insofar as right now we see a growing trend of religions being more accepting and saying, we believe in this, they can believe in something else, but we're still right, but that doesn't mean we have to commit hate crimes on them. We can coexist. Then, finally, on the idea of community. They say that you're more constrained to your religion. We'd say that there's 2 reasons why their model is problematic. First of all, we say that it just does not have the same unique appeal. It is very rare for like online gaming groups or your Facebook group to go to the hospital when you get sick, to actually support you, to meet up every single week and actually share the deep problems that you're struggling with your life. We think this is something unique to religion and something that they can never get on their side of the house. But secondly, importantly, it disproportionately harms vulnerable minorities on their side who do not have access to things like therapy. Therapy is extremely expensive. Not everybody can get access to that. So that means for the poor individuals that are only liberated on our side of the house, we uniquely provide them with the community that they can have, to uniquely provide them with a sense of self that they can never get on their side, insofar as Team Japan just says, go to therapy. So because you prevent extremism, we have liberalized religion, and we also create better communities. Very proud to propose.
Thank you for that fine speech. Welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Okay, am I clearly audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I will start out my notes, write some stuff, and then start my speech. A religious revival in the West alienates the most vulnerable and allows organized religion to commit the worst atrocities. We refuse to shackle individuals into communities that intend to leave them in flames and shambles. I'll read 3 things in this speech. First, rebut to political unity. Secondly, on the clash on liberalization. Finally, on the clash on community. Let's talk firstly about political unity. What we tell you is that political unity is far worse, and we flip this argument. Because religion on their side is weaponized by politicians because politicians have incentives to polarize politics. That is beneficial because they can now get votes by weaponizing this rhetoric. For example, Trump using immigration policy and rhetoric of, for example, associations with Muslims, abortion bans, and all of those stuff. And it splits the political sphere on their side of the house. And importantly, they never prove why you'd suddenly move to the other political side just because you support the same religion, just because you just like MAGA as a whole. I just don't think that this case is realistic. If anything, it's far worse. Therefore, this is not important in round. Let's win on liberalization. 2 things I want to clarify in this clash. First, the people who newly opt into religion and whether they can change religious structures as a whole. And then secondly, people who already are in the religion, which is the actor that they crucially don't defend. Firstly, people who newly opt into religion. The mechanism that they give you is to say moderation happens without proving any incentive analysis of the organized religions themselves. We told you why it is scriptures and therefore you cannot compromise. It is historic and so culturally normalized within communities. Authorities are the most conservative individuals within the community, and authorities will respond to more conservative individuals because they're devoted to the faith. They give more donations, which is the incentive analysis Chhikara told you from first. They never engage with those mechanisms. Even if there are liberal factions within the faith, it just isn't important insofar as the authority won't respond to those mechanisms crucially because of the mechanisms that Chhikara. Refutation. They give it like a matter dump. Let's respond to everything. First, they say that contact theory exists from first, but this is crucially hung on whether or not LGBTQ plus individuals themselves opt into religious communities. I don't think that's likely because they're alienated from the faith themselves. Secondly, they say, it's empirics, and Pope Francis said this, but he didn't even tolerate the sexual identity. It's still a sin in the Catholic faith. I don't think that this empirics things would work. Look at all of the mechanizations compared to that Chhikara gave you. Thirdly, they say that it operates on the fringe cases, and therefore, on our side of the house, religions would still exist, and extreme factions would still exist. But the problem with this is that on our side of the house, it cannot translate to policy. To block support towards gay marriage and to block legislation, to block donations towards things like LGBT plus movements, insofar as you can't capture the vast majority of individuals. A religious revival necessitates a lot of individuals joining the religion, which is the crucial delta that we clarified already from first. The final thing that they say is that you have choice between the Democrats' interpretation of the religious faith and then the Republicans' interpretation of the religious faith. Like, crucially, political parties don't form the religious faith to begin with. That's not the basis by which individuals opt into faith. I think this is ridiculous to begin with. This proves why, firstly, religions inherently are exclusive, thus people would buy into those norms, buy into policies that harms minorities crucially, or won't support the LGBT plus movement, won't support minority movements as a whole, which in and of itself is a harm. But secondly, we told you from first, furthermore, that these individuals would radicalize over time, even when at the point that they join religion, they're not radical. This because religious communities are a tight-knit community. You have contact theory between the people who are in the religion, which has far more leverage over you, far more experience over it, and legitimacy over the faith, which is why you grant a trust towards that person, which is why you buy into more radical factions of the faith, which is why under their side of the house, these people radicalize over time, implement the worst policies for the most vulnerable. Even if you don't take the entirety of this class, I would note the second path of victory within this class, which is people who are already within the faith. We told you why these people feel as a threat, feel liberalization and people opting in as a threat, and therefore would radicalize, do far worse messaging, or do create like new factions that are uncompromisable. Importantly, these people cannot compromise on religious basics insofar as these are the most devoted believers. This is the exclusive harm that we gave you from first, which is even if the vast majority doesn't change, these are the people who do the worst. These are the most terrible harms that happen on their side of the house. For example, shootings in mosques and, for example, churches, which these people do under their side of the house. Even if this is radical under either side of the house, they cross the tipping point, they cross the bar, and they harm minorities to the worst degree. What is the weighing of this clash? The extent of this argument is debate winning at the end of the day. I don't care. Even if I'm a bit more lonely, when the worst case you trade off on gov is people not being able to walk on streets at night, feeling constantly threatened and guilty for being in their own skin as a whole. We think that the extent of the benefit is not something that they can trade off. We already won the debate at this point, regardless of who takes community clash. Before I move on, I'll take a PY.
MAGA supporters are MAGA either way. The delta is those who are conflicted in the middle. You say they're coerced to voting in one party, but that's because there's only one Christian option. Now we give them more options uniquely on our side of the house.
Like, there's a lot of evidence to prove, right? Like, one, you have to provide Democrats' interpretations of politics or like religion would exist under our side. Like, you're gonna get Pope Francis and then like do all those things. Like, secondly, whether or not the middle people are like large in number to begin if they're influence politics in any way. I think our mechanisms are far more comparative, far more competing than yours. Second clash, on community. They say three things under this. Let's flip everything. Firstly, they say that communities you could belong in would exist uniquely on their side. Two responses. One, the problem identification is criminally underexplained within this argument. People choose to opt into communities even in the status quo. People have friends, people have colleagues in the status quo, which is why we are not as lonely as they say, which is why we don't feel this problem to approximate degree. It is unclear why these communities won't work or isn't as effective as their side, even if they do have a diverse body that won't weigh against the harms that we pointed out. Secondly, here's where we flip the argument though. our side has a choice in the community, whereas their side has a diverse body, which means that you don't have a choice with the individuals who you interact with. I chose to opt into the debate community, which is why I have the people who I prefer to live with, whereas under their side of the house, it is an arbitrary community. It is a traditional community, which is why you cannot opt into good communities that you like, good communities that are the most efficient, good communities that gives the most to you, which is why under their side of the house, you opt into worse communities comparatively. Our side gives more benefits and better structures towards people on the ground. Intuition, your annoying neighbors in the religion. That's kind of bad. Secondly, they say that help and volunteering increases under their side. Two responses. One, we have biologically ingrained empathy within ourselves. It is unclear to me why we are cold-hearted or as cold-hearted to the degree where we don't give donations as a whole. We think that this would work because we are social animals. If we didn't care about other people, if we didn't care about community, we wouldn't have existed like right now. Secondly, let's flip this. These secular donations are far more effective than religious donations, insofar as religious donations are uniquely inefficient. First, the Vatican is not accountable to the public. They don't have to be transparent, which is why most donations flood to the Vatican Council, for example, to the salaries of individuals, whereas on our side of how secular charities work on competition, work on things like transparency, work on things like those standards that individuals care about. Secondly, I think that on their side of the house, you don't have to build churches and mosques. On our side of the house, you don't have to waste those money towards religious structures and then give it to the people on the ground who are suffering. Our side's community, our side's support is much, much more effective. The third thing then I want to combat is the spiritual comfort case that they give to you. The flip of this argument is simple, because the spiritual comfort that they give of things like depression, of things like struggling in work, is at best complacency, is at best things like temporary, and on their side says they cannot get the actual solutions. Even if God watches me, that won't lead to structural support. Here's where we flip the argument with Hikaru. We tell you that religious structures are not professionals, therefore they don't give the best advice. For the worst individuals, for the worst loneliness, and for the worst mental harm, professionals like therapists are far more effective in doing so. These people have competitive mechanisms. These people are professionalized in licensing. Therefore, they give far better structures. If people are lonely, they would access these structures because of the incentives, innate incentives that they have. Time. And therefore, I think our set of house, we access better structures. Their set of house, they never solve the structural issues of the causes. We think that on all grounds, we win the case.
Thank you for that fine speech. Welcome the government whip. Yes, I can hear you now.
The black activists of the 18 and 1900s were literally able to utilize a Christianity that was historically used to justify slavery in order to advocate for the equality of all men and all women in the eyes of God. Panel, this is the reality of religion. This is the adaptability of religion. This is what religion truly looks like in the status quo. Don't let opposition mislead you about how absolute religion is. That is simply not true. I'm going to explain to you mechanistically as to why that is within this speech. Firstly, then, I want to tackle a tension that was literally brought up in DLO. So DLO tells you, I guess this is also brought up in LO, but DLO tells you that authorities in general are conservative, and that means that they're unlikely to give in towards these progressive trends and these progressive norms. But then in the same breath, he says that Pope Leo's reinterpretation of gayness as not being a sin had no real effect on the ground, had no real effect on actually getting people to change their idea of gayness. So, clearly these two things are contradictory, right? Either authorities like Pope Leo do have power and do liberalize, if we want to buy their claim that conservative authorities do have as much power as they claim, or the conservative authorities that they claim, they probably don't have as much power as they simply posit, so that we have more grassroots movement either way. Either way, I think this is a clear tension in their case that fundamentally defeats them. But secondly, on this whole point about therapy, I just want to tackle this really quickly. I just don't see how this is at all within the scope of how this impacts the debate. Because we tell you that we can simply access a lot of the benefits of therapy under our side by giving individuals more meaning. But secondly, this is a lot more accessible in the very first place, because as we already told you in Alex's speech, therapy is incredibly expensive. Religion is a lot more easy to access when it comes to actual financial capital that you need to access it. And therefore, we tell you, panel, that this whole point about therapy that they bring up is utter nonsense. Moving on then to rebuttal on this main point about how they talk about how religion is exclusionary. How they prove this is, one, they tell you that there's in groups and out groups. Two, they tell you that conservatives at the top just simply don't want to adapt. One, I just don't think that their argument about in-groups and out-groups and the exclusionary zero-sum nature of religion is really like a charitable in any sense and really complies to reality. One, I just don't think that everyone is as much of a religious fundamentalist as they claim, right? There's likely going to be existing counter-narratives. For example, the very secularism and the very liberalization that they claim exists on their counterfactual, that probably exists on our side too, right? That's the very merits of their case prove that they can actually check and balance the harms of religion that they claim to talk about. But two, we tell you that religion is just not as binary as they say. So what this means then is that religion scriptures, because they often have multiple voices or multiple interpretations, they tend to be contradictory, they tend to not be as absolutist as they claim, meaning that they can easily be reinterpreted if we choose to do so. For example, Quran 9:5 says, kill all the polytheists wherever you find them. Quran 17:33 says, do not kill the soul which Allah has forbidden. What this means then is that obviously, we have seen through history that the fundamental reinterpretation of this by Islamic imams is to say that it complies more with the latter rather than the former, that it complies more with being able to accept everybody rather than killing all non-Islamics. So what this means then, panel, is that it's likely going to be the case that a religion can actually liberalize based on the fact that religion isn't as absolutist or isn't as binary as they claim. But two, we tell you that, panel, if you just were to do like a reality check, their mechanism just doesn't comply, right? We tell you that not only did I bring this up in my intro, but secondly, the fact that black slaves literally fought freedom, literally fought safe spaces within the Christian groups, within church groups in the very first place, and the fact that Pope Leo himself has literally opposed immigration, has literally opposed Trump's immigration policies, despite the fact that Trump has largely advocated his own agenda on a largely Catholic base, shows you that there's literally checks and balances within religion internally that help to scrutinize each other, but also the fact that religion is a lot more progressive than they actually claim and is actually a lot more progressive than they give merit to. On to their point about how religious authorities are simply too conservative to actually given to progressive trends. They say that we don't engage with this at all. I just don't think that this is true. We don't put down the bench that religious denominations exist to a large plethora of degree, meaning that religious authorities isn't just this one traditional authority that has all this power, like a monopoly. We tell you that these religious authorities are likely a ton of religious authorities that are competing with each other within these religious denominations to actually push out their progressive agenda, to actually help garner support within the religious denomination so that they can maintain their legitimacy, so that they can maintain their support base in the first place, so that their religion actually remains crucial in the public sphere. Before I move on to clashes, shall I take a point? 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Yeah, so at best, what you prove in your argument is that you might be able to change religions. We tell you that is slow, it's still conservative to the degree where queerness is still.
Okay, I think you got cut off there. But we tell you that your side, if you can't just keep asserting that religion is conservative, that religion is slow in changing. And again, even if religion is slow in changing, we think only on our side are we able to actually access that change when you get more people to scrutinize religion, when you get religion to go towards more public of an audience. So firstly, on this clash on which side gets better religion, we tell you that religion probably exists symmetrically, right? So it's not as simple as opposition saying that you make a bad thing more popular under our side. I think it's likely going to be the case then that because of the fact that we make it more popular, that's the point in which it becomes less bad. Why? Because religion exists to be on a more extremist level under their side, insofar as the majority of people who follow this religion are largely going to be fundamentalist people, right? Because they follow this religion regardless of whether or not it progressively liberalizes. What this means then is that there's very little checks and balances on this religion internally in the very first place. So what this means, so then the delta on our side then is that this changes because you literally have to force, religion is literally forcing themselves to actually progressively liberalize more so that they can appeal to a wider audience, so that they can appeal to an audience in this era of secularization and liberalization. What this means then is that you actually are able to include a lot of these queer people and a lot of these LGBTQ people that they seem to talk about because we tell you that these people are far more likely to get included insofar as religion is only forced to liberalize under our side when they're actually trying to appeal towards a wider range of people. But secondly then, on this clash of politics, we tell you that the DLO is just missing our point to say that MAGA people remain MAGA people. This was never our target audience in the first place. We tell you that we give these people, these moderates, these centrists, who are religious in nature, more religious options in the very first place. That means that they can vote across the political spectrum, right? They're just likely not going to vote absolutistly towards one particular party or towards one particular side of the political spectrum, probably the right, because they think that only that side is actually religious, only that side is actually able to cater towards the religious beliefs. When you give them options, when you give them choices, religion becomes a lot less totalizing, religion becomes a lot less absolutist, and all of the harms that they talk about only exacerbate under their side. Lastly, then, on society. The whole point about society was largely unengaged with throughout side opposition. So we tell you, panel, that even if you don't buy all of our arguments about how one, religion becomes more liberalizing, but two, how religion becomes a lot better in the political sphere and how it actually gives people more choices. We tell you that our path to victory then would be to win on society because they completely failed to engage this apart from the very minute rebuttal about therapy and how that gives people more meaning to life. We tell you that religious charities exist under our side, religious communities exist under our side, religion is a far more unifying factor under our side at the end of the day. We tell you that the fact that religion is inherently based on progressive ideals like, oh, all people are equal under the eyes of God, like, oh, we need to treat everyone equally, treat thy neighbor, etc. We tell you that all of these ideals then help to create a more unified society in an era of alienation, in an era of war, and in an era of conflict. For all the reasons, panel, religion is fundamentally the path to which we get better societies in the West, and fundamentally the path to which we access better political discourse. So proud to propose.
Thank you for that speech. Welcome the opposition whip.
Okay, am I clearly audible?
Yes.
Thanks so much. Pronouns he, him. I'll take verbal POIs. First way to win this debate is to prove that liberalization of religion is not going to happen. What we told you is that the nature of organized religion is authority has significant power and those authorities are conservative. What is their response? Their response is to say, because people in the bottom want liberalization, religion will liberalize. I'm going to respond to this in 3 levels. First of all, I think the nature and the system of this religion inherently doesn't allow it to do that. For example, being queer is bad. Like abortion is inherently bad. I think these are 2 specific things that definitely exist that cannot be changed, that its nuance cannot be changed. Like, I think they need to prove a specific example that solves these problems. So, if we take their best case scenario, some broad things might change, but I think these specific things cannot change either way. Therefore, I think their incentive analysis is not important. Even if you don't take that. The second level is that this won't happen because their side provide no weighing metrics that prove why people are going to try to change the religion at the expense of risking other important things that are associated with the existence of the religion at that exact moment. Because proposition claims that people find unique and untradeable community in religion. This means even if you want some extent of liberalization, you won't try to do it because you fear that you will be locked out from that community. Because action is the assumption for modern change, there are point forwards at this point. Then proposition comes up and say religion in nature care about the people in the bottom and therefore liberalization is going to happen. This is where our third level of response kicks in. The problem of side proposition in this debate is not that they don't respond. They do respond, but they just counter assert that believers in the bottom is important for the religion and they never weigh it. We do. We have weighed that authorities are the ones that are more important for religion than the number of people, even if there's a significant amount. Why? First of all, more money is donated by the authority. And note that the money is the most important thing in religion in order for that religion to exist. The amount, even if there's a large amount of people in the bottom, the major income that they get is often from these authorities, and therefore this is likely to be the priority. But secondly, authorities have more opportunities for their voices to be heard in comparison to the people in the bottom. This means that their voices are likely to be prioritized simply because of the amount of opinions that is like speculatively seen. This is why we are the only side that provide the weighing metrics for these religious organizations. They never do. We win this clash. Note that this proving liberalization don't happen already wins us a debate because their argument was all dependent on this assumption. We deny that the community is good because they relied on the assumption that liberalization happened. We deny that politics is going to become better because again they relied on the assumption that liberalization is going to happen. We flipped their case and we proved that their counterfactual is going to be worse. This is the first path to victory. But even if you don't take that, I'm going to be charitable in my speech. I'm going to deny all of the things that I have said that 3 minutes, but still prove why you win this debate. The second class is on structural benefits. They try to say 3 things. I'm going to flip all of them. First, they say they provide community. The flip that we gave you from Tekken, yet never responded from their side of the house, is that these communities are often formed and done at the expense of other communities for the simple reason that the amount of time that you can spend with others is zero sum. What is the wing here? The wing is non-religious community is better than religious community for the fact that you have choice. You're able to select the best community for yourself. For example, if you're talking about LGBTQ, the counterfactual on their side, which they explained, was to say they opt into this one religion, but then they cannot opt out. Well, on our side of the house, you have multiple communities that's related and associated with LGBTQ. You have better choice, and you're able to find a community that better matches you. This is the wing that is provided only by our side of the house. Again, I think they do provide a reason, but they just counter assert and never weigh it. The second thing they say is that, oh, donation and volunteer is going to be better. Again, flip. First of all, we say alternative is a lot more efficient and effective because you don't need to build a church and do ceremonies every week. But secondly, what they never respond is that the alternative that is done on the our side of the house is a lot more accountable because the structure of religion means it's hard to take it into account because there's a power structure that you cannot deny. Well, the counterfactual on our side of the house is scrutiny is much better because this is not like an authority organized religion. Implication is, even if we take their best case scenario and say the amount of money that is gathered is large, when the use of it is extremely bad, I think the outcome is bad. Therefore, we are able to flip their case. Because on our side of the house, even if there's like a small delta of the amount of money that is gathered, the use of it is much more efficient, and therefore the amount of donations and the volunteers provided to the people on the ground are far better. The last thing they say is that it's about spiritual connection, that they are able to connect to God, and therefore it's good. We're going to flip this case again. We think that organized religion oftentimes limit access to the connection of God, or at the very least, make it more difficult for people because they require you to do certain things. For example, to donate a certain amount of money, or otherwise you won't be able to connect to God. Well, the counterfactual on our side is that personal connection is much better because you don't have those limitations or you don't have these obligations that is oftentimes hard for minorities and most vulnerable actors to accomplish. This is why, even in terms of vulnerability, it is far better on our side of the house. We flip all of the three analysis on societal structures. This is the only path to victory they provide, and therefore they lose this debate. Before I move on, sure.
You don't need to donate through the Vatican on our side. You can donate directly, but motivated because of religious influences. Normal donations are also not limited on your side. We just have both, and that's why we solve for the onslaught of, for instance, homelessness on the streets right now.
The nature of religion is to earn money through those systems, which means that they are likely to use their coercive structure and power to force the believers to donate to them. The third clash on politics. We flip this case again, yet they never respond. What we told you is that politics in reality is weaponized in order to justify extreme conservative action. Implication is that extremists become more extreme and therefore more polarization is likely to happen. They never prove a weighing metrics that says that people are going to prioritize communication with someone that has a completely different opinion. Well, on our side of the house, we have proved a likely scenario, which is that, again, this is going to be weaponized because religion is something that people generally believe in, and therefore things like abortion, banning abortion is going to be the policy that is going to be passed on their side of the house, and other people are going to go against that. Backlash and polarization is worse. Lastly, then, on minorities, what we have told you, and this is an argument I think they generally drop throughout their speeches, we told you that regardless of whether this religion is going to be liberalized or not, regardless of whether religion is going to be radical or not, insiders and outsiders always exist. This means that oftentimes the minorities are completely excluded or harmed because of this existence of the religion. We get literally no response from their side of the house other than saying, oh, they're going to be in the community. Obviously, they're not. Why would they opt into a religion that says that why would gay people opt into a religion that say that gay is a sin? The weighing here is vulnerability. Even if we lose all of the clashes that I have told you, although I think it's quite clear, the way in which we win this debate is that we're able to save the most vulnerable people on the ground who cannot even opt into these religion, regardless of how liberal it is, regardless of how neutral it is. Then we think those people ought to be prioritized the most in this debate, and we are the only side that can cater to these people. At the end of my speech, what do you know? First, we proved that liberalization will not happen, right? And at this point, we already win this debate, even if you ignore the last 5 minutes of my speech. But even if you still don't take that, we have flipped all of their cases on both politics and societal structures. But then lastly, our third path victory is on minorities. We have explained and weighed to you why this is the most important fact in this debate. For all of these reasons, we win this debate in 3 ways. Very proud to oppose.
Thank you for that fine speech. Welcome the reply speaker of the opposition.
Let me just switch up my notes. Okay. Let's first talk about whether religion will be liberal. And I'm going to point out here that every single thing they bring up within this debate has so many missing burdens that you should take absolutely nothing they say. Let's start with their first thing. The young people who are liberal will change the religion. 3 missing burdens here. Firstly, they never actually proved to you that young people are liberal. That's just an assertion. And I assume that within the current context, young people are becoming even more conservative. They never actually proved this. Secondly, they never proved why young people can influence religion. What we've told you from the very beginning is that the people who donate, the people that have degrees in theology, are the ones that are controlling the religion. They never rebut to this. I think they can't control religion. The third assertion they make is that young people even care enough to do this. I don't think young people are political crusaders and their entire point of joining a religion is to change the religion from the inside out. Why will they care enough to change religion whatsoever? I don't think that that is the case. Then you ought not take this assertion. Let's talk about their second claim they make, that Democrats can co-opt religious messaging. 3 missing burdens here. Firstly, why are Democrats so benevolent to the extent to which they care so much about these sorts of minorities that are going to go to so much political effort to do these sorts of things? Secondly, I don't think that they'll do this to begin with. Within their party, they have minorities, then I'd assume that they don't want to do this. But thirdly, I'm not sure why people will listen, because in the first place, I think religious interpretation was generally largely dominated by conservative people. I don't understand how suddenly a Democrat can come in and say, oh, all of your 100 years of theology is wrong. I don't think that is the case. Then I'd assume that Democrats will never be able to change people's minds. This is also an assertion. The third assertion they make is Pope Leo said being gay is okay, so religion is liberal. I think that generally speaking, he also said abortion is a sin. He also has a lot of conservative stances, and he actually never said being gay is okay. He said that it's just, he still thinks it's a sin. I don't think he's that liberal to begin with. Then I think that you ought to take none of the cases. Then at that point, when religion is illiberal, there are a bunch of harms to that. There are a bunch of policies that become inactive, like the Muslim travel ban within the US, the criminalization of gay activism in Hungary, the lessening of civil liberties for immigrants in the UK, or abortion restrictions all across the Western world. This is the most important impact that exists within this debate because this impacts the most vulnerable people, and this is a very unique impact. Because notice their case on community is not unique whatsoever. You can get community anywhere else. Go to therapy. These sorts of harmful policies are uniquely done through religious revivalism, and that is why it is bad. Then at this point, we win. But let's be charitable here. Let's say that all of their claims are true. What is the deadlock breaker here? 2 main things. Firstly, they never actually rebut to the fact that there are inherent exclusionary narratives of religion. That is to say, religion is always extremist because you need to create sins and you need to create good values. Then that is at the point in which you're still xenophobic to Muslims. That is at the point in which you still want to campaign against abortion laws. That is at the point in which you won't help a gay person going through depression because that is not following your religion. I think then those exclusionary policies are still bad. But secondly, note that they never rebut to the fact that the most extreme become even more extreme. What I told you all the way from LR is that there is a fear that liberalization happens, so even in their best case, the most extreme people become even more extreme. That is at the point in which they commit stuff like hate crimes. That is at the point in which they take people's lives. That ought to be the most valued within this debate because it is the most extreme, because it is the most unique impact that exists within this debate. Now let's talk a bit about community. Right? Because they try and win on this, but I don't think they can win for 2 main reasons. Firstly, I don't understand the premise of their case, right? Because I don't think community is that lacking, and they never prove because they tell us this one-liner that, oh, individualism exists in the current world. Individualism has existed for 80 years. Why are people suddenly becoming lonely? People still want friends. They'll make communities. Their case isn't unique. Just go to therapy. Just join a debate club. There are so many different things you can do. Proud to oppose.
Thank you for that fine speech. Welcome the proposition reply speaker.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. It is clear in this debate that none of Japan is religious, because let's be so for real, we're not living in the 18,000s. Conversation is not completely muted, because if you realize, right, if we transport right now to 100 years ago, I'm pretty sure me being bisexual and coming out in the church is just taboo, and you might just as well get socially ostracized. But I've actually done that, and all I got was like peer support. Society is progressing, the people then are also intaking more progressive norms via channels like media and basic education. If this is the premise on which society operates on, then Japan is completely wrong on religion being some lethal weapon that pits innocent people against each other. But I'm going to be so charitable and engage with that case because God told me to love thy neighbor. I want to engage in 3 different clashes in this speech, 3 different issues. Number 1, on the liberalization of religion, whether or not it's likely. Number 2, on politics and extremism. Lastly, on personal fulfillment. Number 1, then, on liberalization of religion in and of itself, and whether or not like religion is going to be exclusionary. I think this is a very important clash because if it is true, then that's a prerequisite to getting everything, like all the impacts in this round. Like for example, people joining more norms changing, the likelihood of policy change, because you have a more common social fabric in and of itself. They first assert to you from the top of the bench that this is unlikely to happen because religion itself is very exclusionary. I just want to respond by saying, okay, let's take them at their best, right? It's exclusionary. I think they're very vague in their terms of exclusionary because even if it is exclusionary, I would posit it's probably of like more of so of like bad people, right? Like people of like rapists, murderers, people who actively hurt each other. If therefore this is a group of people that religion usually is exclusionary towards, then yes, I agree. And I think this quite literally does nothing for their case because the average person can still opt into religion and enhance discussion. Why is this then the most likely characterization then? We told you multiple things from first. Number 1, the society in general is generally becoming more progressive in the West. Things like education, media, activism. Schools literally celebrate different religions. They have pride flags in their classrooms everywhere. Number 2, religion itself structurally wants to proselytize. They want more people to join their religion. So they're more likely to create more lax regulations and religious dogma surrounding that. So therefore they're more likely to be like less exclusionary as well. Churches aren't yes or no institutions. Anybody can walk into the church and be accepted. I do not think that we're like living in the past anymore, right? But number 3, I just think that even if some religious institutions are exclusionary, we're better because we make religion less exclusionary because people start acknowledging, yes, maybe being bad is like gay is bad, but they are people too, and therefore I should also like acknowledge the fact that they go to my church and they're trying to integrate within my religion. That creates a common identity. You're more likely to be inclusive in that. Even if change is slow on ours at the house, I would posit number 1, it means that it still exists. Number 2, it's going to be done better in the long term because religion is like adapts quite slowly, right? So if it takes quite a while, then you're able to integrate religion far better to liberal progressing societies. I think on their side, the house religion gets stuck in old norms because it is not scrutinized and does not have the capacity of critical mass to actually be changed. I think we take that cleanly. Number 2, on politics and whether or not like extremism happened. And I think this is a really easy clash for us to win because they tell us that politicians can use very extreme rhetoric and have really like rise of extremism, right? We tell you and take them at their best. Yes, politicians can do this, but that is good because that means that extreme rhetoric starts decreasing. Which one is more likely? I think we are far more likely because we co-opt their risk. Even if politicians can use very extreme rhetoric actually decreases on our side of the house. This is because more politicians start coming out to be Christian, then people are less likely to vote for extreme figures because like Trump, because they actually start to have more Christian options. They're actually more likely to look at policies instead of actually looking at their identity. You're able to manifest a far better political discussion as well because people have a shared communal identity at the end of the day. Lastly, I think on personal fulfillment, this is a very, very easy clap for us to win because you literally have a end goal in life. You have fulfillment, you have community, people literally support each other. I don't think that like people pit innocent people against each other within religion. We're also able to have things like food stamps, therapy, donation. Religion becomes far more lax as well because people currently are affected by capitalism and are very, very busy. So therefore, religion integrates better within our own personal lives. Even at our absolute worst, even if religion is exclusionary, if one more person is able to get catharsis, if one more person is able to get spiritual support, that is far better on our side of the house. For all those reasons, we're very, very proud to propose.
Thank you for that fine speech, the proposition reply speaker. So we will head to the deliberation room in Discord, and we'll be back within 10 minutes for the OA and possibly for the rankings. So stay back here, all the debaters. Can my panelists please join me in deliberation room 3? Thank you.